Should Tennessee football hold a spring game but not televise it? Now, let me explain where I'm going with this. We've had a few debates recently about spring games and the concept of it. Many schools are canceling their spring games. Many schools across the country are canceling their spring games because of the issue of tampering. There is a paranoia fear. There is a paranoia among coaches that holding a spring game allows other schools, coaches, representatives, whatever, to not just tamper with players at the game, but use it to try to find some sort of information, particularly if it's televised, where they could scout teams. It's a little weird to me, but that's something that they're doing now. In response to this, some schools have canceled their spring games straight up. Others are doing something interesting, and Alabama is doing the most interesting thing. Alabama has decided to hold their spring game, their A-Day game, that's what it's called, but not televise it. Now, the thinking here is this, and it's a weird thinking, but the A-Day game, fans will still be able to attend. Everybody will still be able to show up, but they're not going to put it on TV. Now, theoretically, I guess the thought is not putting it on TV would assure that there's no way to get a recording of the game to study what some of the teams are running. You might respond that, okay, maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing for them, but at the same time, can't somebody just in the stadium evaluate what they're running and take notes? And can't somebody just film it? Well, not if the Con Stallions rules are in place. What if they say no cameras in the stadium? I mean, you ever been to a comedy show? They allow no cameras in the comedy show. So the question is this: should other schools follow suit? Should Tennessee hold a spring game but not televise it? Is that the win-win that you get, where you still get the fan involvement for the spring game? You get fans being able to show up, having fun. I mean, the spring game used to not be televised anyway. I mean, this is a relatively new thing. I would say maybe 25 years old. And on national TV, we're not even talking 10 years old at this point. So if Tennessee, and they haven't started spring practice yet, were to hold a spring game to allow the fans in, could they not televise it, not allow cameras in, not allow anything in to film it, including in the press boxes, and keep it under wraps where you couldn't actually send any tape to study to any coaches? That's an intriguing thought. And a stadium that size, I don't know if that's possible. I'm just going to be honest with you guys. But it is a win-win because, look, here's the problem with canceling spring games for a lot of schools. This is a big fan experience for a lot of people. You allow players to meet with fans. You allow people who maybe can't go to a game during the season to enjoy a little bit of football action in March or April. There's just a lot of good things that come from this. But if you're going to sit there and just straight up cancel the spring game, well, in that scenario, one, in Tennessee's case, you actually take away a chance at some money because the spring game is a good way to generate revenue, which is a big deal. But more importantly than that, not only are you taking away a chance to generate some money, but you're also kind of creating resentment among the fans. Now, the reason it's money is because I do believe Tennessee charges for the spring game now. So this does come across as a win-win on those terms. And again, nobody's going to be mad that you're not televising the game. How many people actually watch these spring games to begin with? I mean, the televising of the game seems like a money grab in general. So who cares if it's televised? You know, people at the game will have to be the ones to cover it and say what happened. I would say that, look, that's not a bad compromise. I don't think Kalen DeBoer is that. I don't think it's that ridiculous for Kalen DeBoer to do it. Now, I'll say this much. There's only so far you can go with stopping tampering and stopping people filming your opponents. I think this day and age in college football, I'm just going to be honest with you guys, it's become so much like the NFL that it's going to be harder and harder to hide what you're doing. I used to think the NFL all ran pro-style offenses that were more player-driven because the players were just too good, so no schemes could get around it. I'm starting to wonder if that was just the case because everything NFL teams do is so open that it has to be player-driven. I mean, just a thought. And is college football going to go that way? Is college football better if it goes that way? I'm not so sure. That's a topic for another day, but I mean, does anybody really think that college football is better off if you don't have unique coaches running unique schemes consistently? I mean, isn't that kind of what makes the sport so much fun, is so many teams have different styles of play, which is so wildly different from the NFL? I would think so. And and if you can't stop the tampering, is that going to continue? I mean, that's kind of the issue here. So, it's an intriguing thought. I'm not so sure where it ends up, to be fair, but holding a spring game and not televising it does seem like, I guess, it could be a decent compromise if you're able to make sure that nobody in the stadium is actually filming those games. And again, I think it's very difficult. David Speaks says spring games draw fan interest, and this can negatively impact your fan base. There's so much entertainment now; it could detour. Considering CFB is regional. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't know, but again, David, like, are you talking about getting rid of a spring game in general or not televising it? Because I'm not so sure televising it really brings in any fans. And this is why I think what Alabama's doing with the A-Day is actually kind of smart. It's an experimental thing. My question is, does it really stop people from... Okay, the real fear of the spring games is that having something like that so open to the public, some opposition can come in and film what you're doing, particularly if it's televised, and let everybody else, and then kind of get a leg up studying you. That's why teams are canceling it. DeBoer's theory is if you just don't televise it, well, they may see what you're doing, but without the tape to analyze it, there's nothing they can do. It's got to be recorded. So the question is, can they stop the recording? David, you say both in the question I was asking. Okay, so you think it should be televised and exist. I just think having it exist is not going to hurt the fans that much. I'm not televising it. I don't think people are going to be upset. I don't think, David, where I disagree with you is your casual's not sitting down and watching a spring game and going to get hooked on college football with that. It's going to be your big fans. I mean, think about baseball for a minute. Spring training is such a fun event for a lot of people. A lot of fans follow their teams to spring training. It's not what's drawing in new baseball fans, I'll tell you that. Now, an interesting quote from Adam. I feel like we worry too much about what everyone else is doing, wanting to be a leader while acting like a follower. Adam, true, but that's just the way college football is now. I mean, everybody's worried about what everybody else is doing. I mean, everybody in Knoxville still to this day believes that Connor Stallions cost them the game against South Carolina. And Ollie Lane said some interesting things that make us believe that in 2022, Tennessee would have gone to the college football playoff had South Carolina not benefited from the Connor Stallions scenario. There's a lot of validity to that argument. David Speaks says ESPN has a Tennessee Day, Bama Day, which they would play the spring game, etc. Yes, I get what you're saying, David. You can still have like the day dedicated to big games from the teams. I don't think the spring game, watching it itself, though, is going to draw in fans. I want to talk a little bit about this more in a second, but I want to set up the poll question real quick. First, I want to make the point that the show is represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney. Play to win. Why settle? Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. BanksandJones.com. We'll be right back.
Why Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott.
All right, the poll question is up. What should Tennessee football do with its spring game? Cancel it, keep it, but don't televise it, keep it and televise it. You guys let me know. There's a lot to debate here on this. I think that there is a legitimate argument with wanting to keep things under wraps. Now, in terms of Josh Heupel's offense, and we've heard this from a lot of people on our message boards, and you guys might be right, the lack of creativity, it's just a system offense, so you may not need you may not be hiding anything. You may not need to hide your spring game. It's kind of like, I mean, it's totally different, but like the triple option offense back in the day, that was a system that they ran 4 to 5 plays and reacted to what the defense was doing more than anything else. So it wasn't like the film study was going to help you in that regard. And so I think you can make the argument that's why Heupel and companies should hold their spring game and even televise it, because that's kind of a big deal. David Speaks says, sounds like David and we are having debates here, because you go, sorry, Caleb, I think the annual spring game helps morale for each upcoming season. Well, I mean, but if that's the case, hold it and have the fans go. I mean, I don't think watching it on TV helps the morale, David. I'm going to be honest with you. I think televising the spring games is just a way for the SEC network to fill time slots during those days, because during the spring and during March, it becomes harder and harder to think of stuff to do, and that allows them to ration some of their time slots they need to fill. So I don't think it's as easy of a scenario as you're thinking. I mean, it's tough, man. I could tell you, as someone who actually just reports on college football, finding topics to talk about can be very, very tough at different times. I just, particularly in the heart of the March, I know it's March Madness, but there's only so much feature stuff you can do. So that's what makes, and particularly most spring games happen after March Madness ends. So we're talking mid-April, man, it gets hard to find that period between the end of March Madness and the NFL draft. That gets tough. And you got to really work to find something. So that's all I would say with that.